We're back again, same location, same car. The control we have today over the engine and the transmission equals.
Last week we broke Koenigsegg's record.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know Christian was like, damn. But I like this, like, you know, he will then break our record again, we break theirs.
A closed Nevada highway, 2017. A Koenigsegg Agera RS setting 5 world records in a single day, the fastest production car.
Koenigsegg's ever created, the Agera RS Noraya edition. So I want to cover off the specific specification of this car before we get into the fact that this created a new world speed record.
Ever officially verified at 447 kilometers per hour. Internal combustion had reached its frontier. Then, 1 week later, Rimac, a Croatian company founded by a self-taught 21-year-old named Mate Rimac in a garage, broke every number Koenigsegg had just put on the board. The hypercar world expected war. Instead, the two founders revealed something nobody had anticipated: an investment, a collaboration, and a shared philosophy about what performance means when the competition is real enough to demand respect. Everything you are about to hear is documented. None of it was scripted. The record that changed everything. To understand what Koenigsegg achieved on that Nevada highway, it is necessary to understand what the attempt actually required. Not as a logistics exercise, but as the culmination of an engineering argument that had been running for 30 years. Christian von Koenigsegg founded his company in 1994 with a conviction that a car built from first.
My first company when I was 19, it was a trading company. Had nothing to do with cars or design or anything like that. But I realized if I want to start my car company, I need to make some money.
Principles, questioning every assumption the automotive industry treated as settled, could produce performance that established manufacturers, with their established platforms and their established constraints, could not match. The Nevada record was not a marketing exercise. It was proof of a 30-year argument arriving at its conclusion. The Agera RS was not a car designed around the record attempt. It was a car designed around the engineering philosophy, around the belief that weight reduction, aerodynamic efficiency, and power delivery could be pursued simultaneously without the compromises that larger manufacturers accepted as inevitable. The 1-megawatt internal combustion engine at its center produced figures that combustion engineers had spent decades insisting were unachievable in a street-legal production machine. The 5 records set in a single day, including 0 to 400 kilometers per hour and back to 0, top speed in both directions, and the two-way average, were not the result of one optimized run. They were the result of a machine that performed at the absolute limit consistently, across repeated attempts on public asphalt. What made the Nevada record significant beyond the number was the context in which it was set.
This is the Koenigsegg Agera RS, and it's basically to the numbers 1 to 6, and it makes this Frankenstein of a hypercar even more of an event to drive.
These were not closed-circuit runs on a purpose-built track with controlled conditions and teams of engineers managing every variable. They were public road tests submitted to Guinness World Records, filmed by independent cameras, verified by independent officials. The standards for verification were the same standards applied to any production car record. The machine had to be a road-legal production vehicle, completing the run in both directions within a specified time window. Koenigsegg met every condition. The record was clean. The number was real. The internal combustion engine had arrived at something that felt, to the people who had spent careers pushing it forward, like a genuine physical frontier. Not an arbitrary milestone, but a real convergence. The point at which tire compounds, aerodynamic drag, and the energy density of liquid fuel combine to define what a machine that breathes air and burns hydrocarbons can do on a surface that humans actually drive on. Koenigsegg had reached that frontier, documented the arrival with independent verification, and handed the hypercar world a benchmark that the community absorbed with the quiet certainty that it would stand for years. 1 week was not years. What the Nevada record also established was the credibility of Koenigsegg as a company whose engineering claims are not marketing statements but verifiable physical facts. Every record the company had set before Nevada had been challenged, qualified, or contextualized by observers looking for reasons to discount what a small Swedish manufacturer had achieved. 5 records in a single day, independently verified on a public road with Guinness documentation. That was a different kind of proof. It was the kind that requires no interpretation. The number speaks. Then Rimac spoke louder. There is also what the Nevada record meant inside the Koenigsegg factory. Christian von Koenigsegg has described the Agera RS record attempt in subsequent interviews as the culmination of something the company had been building towards since its founding. Not as a goal that was planned from the beginning, but as the natural endpoint of a philosophy applied consistently enough that the performance arrived at the frontier of what was physically possible. The team that prepared the car for Nevada had spent months on the attempt. The driver, factory test driver Nicholas Lilja, had prepared specifically for the conditions. When the 5th record fell, and the documents were signed and the footage was submitted, the factory knew it had proven something definitive. 1 week later, the question became what proof actually means in an industry moving as fast as the cars. The man who arrived to challenge Koenigsegg, Mate Rimac, was 21 years old when he converted a 1984 BMW E30 into an electric vehicle in a garage in Croatia.
When a new guy comes and claims he made the most powerful electric car, no one is going to believe him. How can he convince everyone he did? Call Top Gear and hand the car over? Maybe that's not such a good idea.
The conversion was not a hobbyist project in the sense of something done for entertainment. It was the product of a specific and documented frustration. The combustion engine in the car had failed. The replacement parts were expensive, and Rimac decided that electric motors were a more interesting solution than another internal combustion engine. What happened next was not planned. The converted car became, in drag racing competitions around Zagreb, faster than almost everything it faced. Rimac noticed. The people watching noticed. Rimac Automobili was founded in 2009, 15 years after Koenigsegg, in a country with no automotive manufacturing tradition of any kind, by a founder with no formal engineering qualification and no institutional backing. What Mate Rimac had was a specific and developing understanding of electric powertrain architecture that the established automotive world had not yet taken seriously, and a willingness to apply that understanding to the performance problem without the assumptions that conventional manufacturers brought to the question. The first wrecked Rimac Concept 1 was unveiled in 2011.
We wanted to make the Concept 1 feel special in every regard. All the pieces are made with a lot of care and detail right here in our factory, even the parts that you will never see.
It produced over 1,000 horsepower from 4 electric motors. The industry treated it as a curiosity. Rimac treated it as a starting point. What the Nevera represented, when it arrived as the second-generation Rimac hypercar, was the answer to a question the industry had been avoiding. Could electric powertrains produce the kind of performance that defined the hypercar category at its highest level? Not just acceleration from a standing start, where electric motors have always held a fundamental physics advantage, but sustained high-speed performance and the total performance profile that drivers at this level actually demand across an entire lap or an entire road? The Nevera answered the question with documented figures. 1,914 horsepower from 4 electric motors, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 1.85 seconds, and a verified top speed that placed it in direct conversation with the fastest combustion machines ever built. The journey from a broken BMW in a Croatian garage to the CEO of the company that now holds a majority stake in Bugatti is a biographical fact that the hypercar world has not fully processed. Mate Rimac is in his mid-30s. He built a company from nothing, in a country without the infrastructure that automotive development requires, in a market dominated by names with century-long histories, and he did it by applying a philosophy that the established industry dismissed. Until the cars started setting records the established industry could not match. What does that trajectory reveal about where genuine performance engineering actually comes from? and what the industry's assumptions about geography and tradition have been costing it. Rimac's rise also forced the established hypercar world to confront a question it had been comfortable deferring: whether electric powertrains were a transitional technology on the way to something else, or whether they represented a genuine performance architecture that would eventually define what extreme automotive engineering means. Every Rimac record made that question harder to defer. Every documented test result made the answer harder to avoid. By the time the Nevera broke the Koenigsegg benchmark, the industry's position on electric performance had shifted from dismissal to acknowledgement. What it had not yet processed was what would happen next between the two companies and between the two philosophies. The Porsche and Hyundai investments in Rimac, both publicly documented.
Porsche is raising its stake in electric supercar maker Rimac. The Volkswagen unit is set to own 24% of the Croatian firm. It's the second time it's raised it since an initial investment in 2018.
Both representing strategic bets by established manufacturers that Rimac's electric powertrain expertise was the most advanced available outside the largest technology companies, told the story that the records alone could not fully convey. When Porsche invested, it was not buying a small startup for its brand value or its design language. It was buying access to electric powertrain architecture that Porsche's own engineers had concluded they could not develop faster internally. That investment is, in its own way, a record. It is the established industry acknowledging that the company that should not have existed had built something that could not be ignored. Record that rewrote the hypercar hierarchy. The specific nature of what the Nevera did to the Koenigsegg record requires understanding what makes electric performance fundamentally different from combustion performance. Not better or worse in every dimension, but different in the dimension that matters most for record attempts. An internal combustion engine at the performance level of the Agera RS is a system of extraordinary complexity operating at the absolute edge of its tolerances. It requires warm-up time. It requires the correct ambient temperature. It requires fuel at the correct temperature and pressure. It requires atmospheric conditions to fall within a narrow range. Every run involves variables that the team manages but cannot fully control. Every attempt carries variance. Electric motors do not breathe. They do not have warm-up curves. They do not have the atmospheric sensitivity that combustion systems carry. The torque is available immediately, at any temperature, on any attempt. The consistency of performance across multiple runs is a structural feature of the technology, rather than an achievement of preparation. When Rimac brought the Nevera to the record circuit, the machine performed with a repeatability that combustion engineers acknowledged as something their platforms could not replicate. Not because the combustion engineers were less skilled, but because the fundamental physics of the two systems produced different performance profiles in the specific conditions that record attempts create. The record the Nevera set arrived with a quality that the community recognized immediately. It was not a marginally faster time achieved through optimized conditions on a perfect day. It was a demonstration that the electric powertrain, at the level of engineering that Rimac applied to it, had moved past what combustion could achieve in the performance metrics that define this category. The standing kilometer, the 0 to 300, the 0 to 400. Each number changed. What does it mean when the machine that breaks the records performs the same way on the first attempt as on the fifth, and when the limiting factor is no longer atmospheric pressure, but the grip of the tires and the courage of the driver? It means the conversation about the future of performance has a new set of terms, and the person who set those terms was building cars in Croatia less than 15 years earlier. The hypercar world absorbed the Rimac records with a combination of genuine admiration and unresolved anxiety. Admiration, because the engineering was obviously exceptional and the results were obviously real. Anxiety, because the implications for the established manufacturers were obvious too. If a Croatian startup founded by a self-taught engineer could surpass 30 years of Koenigsegg development inside 1 week, what did that say about the technology trajectory? And what did it require from every other manufacturer who had staked their future on internal combustion performance? What the Rimac record also demonstrated was something about the pace of development in electric powertrain engineering versus the pace of development in combustion. Internal combustion had 300 years of accumulated refinement behind it. The gains achievable at the frontier were measured in fractions. Fractions of a second, fractions of a percentage point of efficiency, fractions of a gram of weight reduction on components already engineered to their material limits. Electric powertrain engineering in 2017 was still on a steep development curve. The gains available were not fractions. They were substantial steps forward, achievable in years rather than decades, by teams that had not yet encountered the hard ceiling that combustion had been approaching for a generation. The trajectory implied by the Nevera's performance figures was not a record that would stand. It was a record that would keep falling as the technology matured. The anxiety proved unnecessary, for a reason that the conventional rivalry narrative had not prepared anyone to expect. The two founders whose companies stood on either side of the broken record were already in a more interesting relationship than the competition between them suggested. The record had fallen. The conversation that followed was not what the hypercar world had scripted. It was better. The rivalry that never happened. The conventional expectation when a record falls. When one company achieves something that another spent years building toward and a challenger surpasses within days, is conflict. The established player defends the achievement. The challenger is dismissed or minimized. The press coverage frames the exchange as a rivalry, finds the sharpest possible contrast between the two parties, and constructs a narrative that places them in opposition. This is the template. It is what the hypercar world expected when the Nevera broke the Koenigsegg record. It is not what happened. Christian von Koenigsegg's documented public response to what Rimac had achieved was not defensive. It was not dismissive. It was the response of someone who had spent 30 years in an engineering discipline that respects demonstrated results above all other arguments, and who recognized in what the Nevera had done a demonstration that deserved genuine acknowledgement. The mutual respect between the two founders was not a diplomatic performance for the press. It was grounded in a documented history of interaction and investment that predated the record by years. What the hypercar world did not fully appreciate at the time the record fell was the depth of the existing relationship between the two companies. Koenigsegg had made a documented investment in Rimac. The investment was strategic. It reflected a belief, stated publicly by Christian von Koenigsegg, that electric powertrain technology was not a competitor to what Koenigsegg builds, but a complement to it. The Koenigsegg Agera, a 4-seat hybrid hypercar producing over 1,700 horsepower from a combination of a small combustion engine and 3 electric motors, is the hardware expression of that belief. It is a machine that could not exist without the electric powertrain, philosophy that Rimac had developed and that Koenigsegg had invested years in understanding. The Agera is worth examining specifically because it is not a hybrid in the sense of a car that uses electric motors to improve fuel economy. It is a hybrid in the sense of a car that uses electric motors to make a combustion engine operate at its absolute efficiency peak at all times, the combustion engine running at its optimal RPM regardless of road speed. The electric motors managing the difference between what the engine produces and what the wheels need at any given moment. The result is a powertrain architecture that delivers performance beyond what either system could produce alone, while producing the combustion sound and engagement that defines the hypercar experience. This is what Koenigsegg learned from its relationship with Rimac's electric powertrain work. The collaboration also extended in the other direction. Rimac, as it scaled from a Croatian startup into the entity that now steers Bugatti's future, drew on the manufacturing philosophy and quality standards that Koenigsegg had spent 30 years developing for low-volume hypercar production, building a handful of extraordinary machines per year, with the obsessive attention to detail and zero-tolerance approach to compromise that defines both companies. requires a production culture that cannot be imported from mainstream automotive manufacturing. Koenigsegg had built that culture. Rimac was building it in parallel. The documented relationship between the two companies created a channel through which the lessons of small volume, perfection could flow in both directions, strengthening both organizations in ways that the rivalry framing completely missed. Mate Rimac has described Christian von Koenigsegg,
and the odds of us being here today are so slim. I mean, Christian visited us when we were just starting. We were maybe 5-6 employees, had the first car when he was going to Croatia to vacation.
In documented public statements, as one of the few people in the automotive world who understood what Rimac was building before the records made it impossible to ignore. That acknowledgement from a founder who built his company without the institutional support that the established players take for granted carries real weight. It describes a relationship built on shared conviction about engineering rather than on commercial alignment. The two companies are competing for records and for the attention of the same customers. They are also invested in each other's development and arriving at the same conclusions about the future from different directions. Both things are simultaneously true. What this means in practical terms is visible in the products both companies are now building. The Koenigsegg Agera exists because Christian von Koenigsegg believed that electric motors could make a combustion engine more effective rather than replace it. The Rimac never exists because Mate Rimac believed that electric motors, applied with the same obsessive engineering attention that Koenigsegg applies to combustion, could produce a performance profile that redefined the hypercar category. Both beliefs have been validated by documented results. The question of which approach wins is the wrong question. The question of what they produce when the philosophies converge is where the story actually leads. The future was never in Italy. There is something worth examining carefully about the geography of this story. The two companies that now define the frontier of hypercar performance are Swedish and Croatian. Not Italian, not German, not British. The established centers of automotive performance, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bugatti, McLaren, are watching their records fall to companies built outside the traditional geography of the industry by founders who approach the engineering problem without the institutional assumptions that traditional manufacturers carry as the accumulated weight of their own history. What does it mean when the frontier moves to places the industry did not expect? It means that the traditional advantages, the century-long brand histories, the established supplier relationships, the accumulated institutional knowledge of combustion engineering are less protective at the frontier than they were at every previous stage. The frontier has moved to a place where the relevant expertise is electric powertrain architecture, software-defined performance systems, and the integration of combustion and electric at the component level. Neither Sweden nor Croatia had a tradition in any of these areas. Both Koenigsegg and Rimac built that expertise from the ground up, without the legacy assumptions that would have constrained the design decisions they made. That freedom produced the results the records document. The documented positions of both founders on the future of extreme performance share a specific feature. Neither argues for the elimination of the other's approach. Christian von Koenigsegg has described the small combustion engine paired with electric motors.
Most of you who are familiar with combustion engines and especially car engines know that there are camshafts involved to move the valves inside the cylinder head.
As producing a driving experience that neither approach delivers alone. The combustion engine provides the sensory engagement, the sound, the mechanical connection, the tactile feedback through the controls. That defines what driving a hypercar feels like at the emotional level. The electric motors provide instantaneous torque, performance consistency, and efficiency that combustion cannot match. Together, they produce something that exceeds what either delivers in isolation. That is not a compromise. It is an upgrade. Mate Rimac has built a company now deeply integrated into the established hypercar world through the Bugatti Rimac joint venture. A partnership that, places Rimac's electric powertrain expertise at the center of one of the most storied automotive brands in history. The next generation of Bugatti performance will be shaped by the electric powertrain philosophy that a 21-year-old developed in a garage in Croatia. What does it mean when the oldest name in hypercar history hands its future to the newest? It means the industry has acknowledged, at the institutional level, what the records have been saying for years. The technology transition is real, and the companies best positioned for it are the ones that started building toward it earliest. The record between Koenigsegg and Rimac will change again. The technology will advance beyond what both companies currently produce. The two-way top speed record, the acceleration benchmarks, the standing kilometer, all of these numbers will move, set by machines that do not yet exist using engineering solutions that have not yet been developed. But the dynamic that the Koenigsegg-Rimac relationship established, competing without contempt, acknowledging achievement across the philosophical divide, investing in each other's development, because the shared goal is better performance rather than exclusive dominance, that dynamic will shape what the hypercar world becomes for longer than any single record number. What Koenigsegg set and Rimac broke was not just a speed record. It was the beginning of a conversation about what extreme performance looks like when the two people most committed to finding its limits are also committed in documented investments and public statements and the hardware of the cars themselves to finding them together. The rivalry is genuine. The respect is genuine. The collaboration is genuine. All three things exist simultaneously in an industry that usually makes room for only one of them at a time. That is what makes this story different from every other record that has ever fallen in the hypercar world. The number changed. The relationship behind the number changed more. Two records, two founders. One unexpected truth, that the most intense competition in the hypercar world produced not a rivalry but a relationship. Koenigsegg invested in Rimac before the records fell. The Agera exists because of what that investment taught. The Bugatti-Rimac joint venture exists because the industry eventually followed where these two companies had already been leading. The number on the record board will change again. What will not change is what this story revealed about where genuine engineering ambition comes from and what it produces when two builders respect each other enough to compete without contempt. Hit like. Drop a comment, Koenigsegg or Rimac, who sets the next record and why. Bugatti is next.